Q Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishop Briggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @CuneReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@cunereview.com. That is INFORMATION@CuandReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From the National, Tuesday the 22nd of April 2025, from the news section. Donald Trump outlines plans to visit Scotland this year. Article written by James Walker. Donald Trump has outlined his plans to visit Scotland as part of a trip to the UK later this year. Last week, the US President said that his unprecedented second state visit to the UK was likely to take place in September, with Windsor Castle in Berkshire reportedly being lined up as the main venue. But speaking to The Times, Trump has revealed he hopes to visit Scotland as well, the Trump International Golf Links in Aberdeenshire specifically. "I will be there. I hope to be there," he said. The US President also suggested it could coincide with the grand opening of a second 18-hole course on the Many Estate, named the MacLeod Course after his Scottish mother. "We're opening a fantastic project there and I hope I'm going to get to see it. It's going to be great," he's added. It comes after a poll for The National found that the majority of Scots do not think the US President's visit should go ahead, as long as his tariffs on the UK remain in place. Trump told reporters in the Oval Office last week, "I was invited by the King and the country. Great country. They're going to do a second, as you know. A second fest. That's what it is. A fest. And it's beautiful. And it's the first time it's ever happened to one person. The reason is we have two separate terms, and it's an honour. I'm a friend of Charles. I have great respect for King Charles and the family, William. We have really just a great respect for the family. I think they're setting a date for September." Discussions are ongoing between the White House, Downing Street and Buckingham Palace to determine the precise details of the visit. And that article was written by James Walker. From the National, Tuesday the 22nd of April 2025, from the politics section. Keir Starmer breaks silence on Supreme Court gender ruling. Article written by Gregor Young. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has finally broken his silence on the Supreme Court's gender ruling. Last week, the Scottish Government lost a high-profile case at the UK Supreme Court to anti-trans campaign group For Women Scotland. The top judges ruled on Wednesday that the terms woman and sex in the Equality Act 2010 refer to a biological woman and biological sex. The ruling made clear that a trans woman with a gender recognition certificate, who under a 2004 Act became the required sex for all purposes, did not have access to single-sex services provided for by the later 2010 Act. Starmer, who last week was on his Easter holidays, has been under pressure to address the ruling in the days since the judgment was announced. The Prime Minister said, "A woman is an adult female," when pushed on whether he believed a trans woman was a woman following the court's decision. The Prime Minister told ITV West Country, "I think the Supreme Court has answered that question." Asked if that meant he did not believe a trans woman is a woman, Starmer said, "A woman is an adult female, and the court has made that absolutely clear. I actually welcome the judgment because I think it gives real clarity. It allows those that have got to draw up guidance to be really clear about what that guidance should say. So I think it's important that we see the judgment for what it is. It's a welcome step forward. It's real clarity in an area where we did need clarity. I'm pleased it's come about. We need to move and make sure that we now ensure that all guidance is in the right place according to that judgment." Meanwhile, in Scotland today, the Social Justice Secretary is due to address MSPs on the Scottish Government's response to the ruling. Shirley-Anne Somerville is expected to give a statement on the issue in the Scottish Parliament on Tuesday, as MSPs return from recess. Health Secretary Neil Gray is also expected to meet the Equality and Human Rights Commission, EHRC, this week, as the government is urged to issue fresh guidance to public bodies on single-sex spaces. They will discuss existing guidance on single-sex spaces within the NHS and reports of a forthcoming Guide to Transitioning document. SNP ministers have said they are willing to work with the EHRC and UK ministers on developing guidance in light of the ruling. And that article was written by Gregor Young. From The National, Tuesday the 22nd of April 2025, from the Politics section. Milestone as SNP launch new disability benefit across Scotland. Article written by Xander Eliards. The Scottish Government has opened nationwide applications for a new benefit payment. The national rollout of the Pension Age Disability Payment, which replaces the UK Government's attendance allowance, began on Tuesday after a pilot scheme across 18 of Scotland's 32 council areas. The payment is meant to help people of state pension age who are disabled or have a long-term health condition to afford the additional costs involved in looking after themselves or staying safe. The SNP government said it will be the 15th benefit which they deliver through the increasingly devolved system. They added that anyone currently claiming the attendance allowance through the UK government do not need to take any action. The transfer to the new devolved benefit will happen automatically in phases throughout 2025. Social Justice Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville said, "The national launch of Pension Age Disability Payment is an important milestone in the development of our social security system that will treat everyone with dignity, fairness and respect. The pilot phases have allowed us to put our different approach into practice, learning and improving before rolling the benefit out across Scotland. It is vital older people who are disabled, terminally ill, or those who have care needs get the money they need to help them look after themselves, stay safe and live with dignity. The Scottish Government is committed to ensuring everyone gets the financial support they're entitled to, and this has not changed following the UK Government's announcements on benefit reforms." Debbie Horn, Scottish Policy and Public Affairs Manager at the charity Independent Age, said it was important for people to claim the benefits if they are entitled to them. Our Older People's Economic Wellbeing Index Scotland found that 1 in 4, 24%, of people in later life with a health condition are not aware of disability-related social security payments, Horn said. This is money for people of state pension age who are disabled, have a long-term health condition, or are terminally ill. It is not means tested. For older people who think they might be eligible, they can find out more from Independent Age's new Pension Age Disability Payment Guide. This is free and has up-to-date advice on what the entitlement is and how to claim. It is available through the Independent Age website or by calling our free helpline on 0800 319 6789 to request a copy. Our helpline and advice team can also advise any older people who are unsure whether or not they could be eligible for the payment. Age Scotland Chief Executive Catherine Crawford said, "Pension Age Disability Payment will be a vital means of support for older people who have a disability or long-term health condition. With rising bills and cost of living stretching many beyond their means, it's vital that older people are not missing out on any financial support. If you're unsure of your eligibility or looking for support with an application, please don't hesitate to get in touch with the Age Scotland helpline on 0800 12 44 222. Use our online benefits calculator at www.age.scot/benefits calculator. Or book a place on one of our new workshops which are designed to support and give guidance to anyone who is considering an application for themselves or someone else." And that article was written by Xander Eliards. From The National, Tuesday the 22nd of April 2025, from the news section. Prince Andrew linked to Michelle Moan's PPE MedPro firm. Article written by Lucy Jackson. Prince Andrew's business partner is involved in the PPE firm linked to Michelle Mone, a new report has found. Accountant Arthur Lancaster is sole director of the Innovate Global, a business venture launched by the Duke of York, which has also been linked to an alleged Chinese spy. Lancaster is also the sole director of PPE MedPro, the company led by Mone's husband Doug Barrowman, which is currently under investigation by the National Crime Agency, NCA, over a £200 million contract awarded during the COVID pandemic. The investigation was first launched by the NCA in 2021, after it was claimed that millions of the firm's hospital gowns were not fit for purpose. Last month, Mone accused the NCA of smearing her as a criminal, claiming that the agency had waged a ruthless campaign to destroy us, dragging out an investigation with no merit, no justification and no end in sight. Mone and Barrowman, both from Glasgow, have been interviewed by the NCA and deny any wrongdoing. In her first interview, when the scandal emerged in 2023, Mone insisted the only error she had made was lying to the press about her and her family's involvement, but insisted it was not a crime. A new report into Prince Andrew's links to PPE MedPro was published on Saturday by the Daily Mail's special correspondent Glenn Keough. Lancaster, 61, was previously appointed to front Prince Andrew's pitch at Palace investment firm, after the royal was forced to step aside following his disastrous Newsnight interview in 2021. The company was dissolved in June 2021. The following year, the Duke of York launched Innovate Global Limited, which Lancaster is also involved with as the firm's sole director. According to court documents, alleged Chinese spy Yang Tengbo was instrumental in launching the business in China. In 2021, a firm led by Lancaster called AML Tax UK Limited was fined £150,000 by HMRC for aggressively promoting tax avoidance schemes in the UK. HMRC said the firm was part of Barrowman's Isle of Man-based Knox Group, and it was reported at the time that the pair had been business partners for some time. The HMRC tribunal described Lancaster's evidence as evasive and said he displayed a lack of candour. Lancaster, who has multiple company appointments registered with Companies House, resigned from AML in May last year. When he was appointed at PPE MedPro in May 2023, a spokesperson said Lancaster had been brought in to oversee the resolution of a contractual dispute and the administration of the company until the dispute was resolved. A spokesperson for Barrowman said Lancaster acted for the Duke in a personal capacity at all times and has been an associate of the Duke for many years. Prince Andrew and Lancaster did not respond to the Daily Mail's requests for comment, and that article was written by Lucy Jackson. From The National, Tuesday the 22nd of April 2025, from the news section. Vatican announces date for funeral of Pope Francis. Article written by Lucy Jackson. The Vatican has announced the date for the funeral of Pope Francis. The Pope died on Monday morning after a cerebral stroke that led to a coma and irreversible heart failure. John Swinney led tributes to the Pope in Scotland, describing Francis as a voice for peace, tolerance and reconciliation. Francis was also remembered for his outspoken commitment to peace in Gaza, after he used his last speech to reiterate calls for a ceasefire. On Tuesday, cardinals met in Rome for the first time since the Pope died to confirm the details of his funeral. The funeral will take place on Saturday at 9 a.m. UK time. As is tradition, the funeral must be held between 4 and 6 days after the death of the Pope. After the funeral, there are 9 days of official mourning, known as the Novandale. Cardinals also confirmed that the Pope's body will be moved to St. Peter's Basilica on Wednesday to allow the public to pay their respects before the burial. Director of the Holy See Press Office, Matteo Bruni, said the transfer to St. Peter's Basilica could happen as early as Wednesday morning. His death starts a centuries-old ritual, where first the Camerlengo Irish-born Cardinal Kevin Farrell certifies Pope Francis's death and seals the papal apartment. Cardinal Farrell will carry out the administrative and financial duties of the Holy See until a new pope takes over. Before the cardinals, senior members of the Catholic Church convene in the Sistine Chapel for the conclave, the secret meeting at which a new pope will be elected. The Church enters a period called sede vacante, or the vacant see. To give everyone time to assemble, the conclave must begin 15 to 20 days after the sede vacante is declared, but it can start sooner if the cardinals agree. And that article was written by Lucy Jackson.
This is from The National on Tuesday the 22nd of April 2025, from the comments section. How sectarianism made its mark in this key Scottish by-election. This article is by Hamish Morrison. It's an unfortunate fact of life that most people in the west of Scotland know what is implied by the question, "What school did you go to?" Strip away the pretence, and it's more accurately phrased, "Are you a Catholic or a Protestant?" While great strides have been made in leaving the old sectarian divides in the past, it would be naive to believe they were ever entirely consigned to history, especially in Glasgow and the satellite towns of Lanarkshire. It is here we set our scene for the upcoming Hamilton, Lark Hall and Stonehouse by-election, triggered by the sad passing of Christine McKelvey. Sectarianism, never quite vanquished as the idealistic politicians of yesterday would have liked to believe, lingers in Scottish politics. Evidence of this as campaigning began for this crucial by-election has not exactly been glaring, but look closer and you will find it. The SNP have been briefing stories about Labour candidate Davy Russell's ties with the Old Boys Club of Glasgow when the city was still red. One of the few photographs of him on record was from an outing he took with former council leader Frank McAveety and other council high Heidians to watch Rangers play at Ibrox. That this picture was briefed out to the press alongside details of his links with the Glasgow Labour mob, as well as his business links with Gers Supremo Barry Ferguson, was not coincidental. Some in the SNP believe that Russell has been put forward in the race to galvanise the Unionist and likely Rangers supporting vote in this part of South Lanarkshire. Elsewhere, the SNP made a point this week of announcing they had suspended campaigning as a mark of respect after the death of Pope Francis. Scottish Labour made no such announcement and did not respond to an inquiry from the National as to whether campaigning continued. It's hard to see this as anything other than the logical continuation of a deliberate strategy carried out more than 20 years ago to win over Scottish Catholics, who were historically repelled by the Protestant Party, as historian Tom Devine once called the SNP. If this seems an outrageously outdated way of looking at the world, consider the political calculations one must make in a town like Lark Hall, where the council spent £17,000 on replacing vandalised green traffic lights, and the Subway sandwich shop's sign is black instead of emerald. And that article was written by Hamish Morrison and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday the 22nd of April 2025, from the comments section. Shiny new food technologies may damage Scotland's reputation. This article is by Ruth Watson. Most of us like the idea of easy answers to difficult scenarios, especially ones we as individuals can't do much about. Climate change and biodiversity collapse, war on Europe's borders, the cost of living, and gaps on supermarket shelves as Brexit continues to hit fresh produce supply chains. These are all issues which can only be resolved with government and international agreements and action. it can leave us feeling helpless. There are increasing warnings that impacts of climate change are likely to lead to food insecurity across the world. When scientists say, but we have technology which can fix that, we breathe a sigh of relief because some grown-ups are looking after it. New genomic techniques, NGT, are the next generation of genetic modification. Precision breeding is a term used to describe NGT, which alters genetic material. The argument goes that because this technology adds nothing novel to the plant genetics, it's akin to accelerating a natural process and is so safe it shouldn't be labelled as gene editing. However, there is evidence of traces of genetic transfer when the foods are eaten. There are issues around allergens and concerns about altered genetics entering wild plant populations and neighbouring crops. The EU is looking again at so-called precision-bred crops with a view to relaxing the restrictions on what can be grown and how it can be used. Work is ongoing in England to develop a framework for precision-bred crops. Scotland has long held out against allowing this technology to move from important academic research in limited fields and into commercial production. Last year, First Minister John Swinney said, "The SNP's stance is not to pursue genetic editing. Even if they wish to in Europe, it's not in our interest. Here in Scotland, we produce a high quality of produce, and I would not like to take away from that." Scotland's reputation as a nation which produces pure, authentic food and drink which people can trust is enormously important, providing livelihoods and supporting thriving communities across the country. Some 47,000 people are employed by our food and drink sector, which is worth $5.2 billion, according to a recent Food and Drink Federation report. Thus, there were some highly scandalised headlines about U-turns when it became known that the Scottish Government ministers have been holding roundtable talks to find out more about the science and attitudes around the issue. Over the years, I've spoken to farmers and scientists, as well as some in the food and drink sector, who wish to see Scotland embrace the new technology. While I hope NGT is rejected at a commercial level here, I think it is crucial that our decision makers are involved in open conversations with people who have specialist knowledge and a deep understanding of food security and food supply for our nation. A leading agricultural scientist with many years of experience working with NGT told me, "There is no silver bullet to mitigate the impact of climate change. It might be very appealing to think that a field planted with a drought-resistant variety will be the answer. But what happens if the genetics are too restricted to cope with an unusually wet summer? What happens if the genetics escape into the wild population? Who will be responsible if things go wrong?" Another potential issue is that NGT genetics mix with the wild population or cross with conventional seeds in another field. Some NGT crops need to be grown in conjunction with the use of chemicals. In theory, this could hit wild populations, increase costs for farmers, or lead to the loss of organic certification for others. And it is possible, if the genetics are identifiable, that a seed company could say the intellectual property of all affected plants belongs to them. There are numerous and devastating stories of this sort involving the genetically modified sector, with several court cases ongoing in North America. Scotland's reputation for authenticity and natural produce is better served, in my view, by supporting the growing number of farmers turning again to plants with diverse genetics, which can deliver harvest in a range of conditions. The yields might be a little less than we see in fields from uniform varieties, but the mood is surprisingly upbeat among the farmers I've spoken to, as their costs and inputs fall once the transition is made. More are also making a move towards regenerative techniques which encourage biodiversity and support healthy soils which mitigate weather impacts, including torrential rains and flooding. The Gaia Foundation, a charity which aims to protect biocultural diversity, recently launched a crowd breeding project, a kind of seed cooperative, with 28 farms across the British Isles and Ireland, working together to develop commercial crops using open pollination, not only harvesting produce for sale, but also saving seeds for the next season's sowing. Crowd breeding reduces the risk to individual farmers by pooling their seeds, and there is diversity, supply, and resilience. Holly Sylvester is a farmer working with the team at East Neuk Market Garden and is the Future Resilience Seed Coordinator for the Gaia Foundation. As we chat, she tells me about how the world almost lost broccoli as an open source seed. The broccoli we buy in supermarkets is from a conventional F1 seed. But it is a hybrid which has male sterility running down the female line. That sterility cannot be reversed. So a farmer growing a crop of this broccoli from bought-in seed could never use them to grow seed for saving. Only the parent broccoli, owned by a small number of very big seed companies, are fertile and produce the seeds used by farmers to grow the broccoli we eat. A scientist in the US realised there was a very real risk that all broccoli with breeding potential could end up being owned by a handful of seed companies. He set out to find varieties which still were being grown using promiscuous pollination, collect the seed, and so ensure broccoli which can be bred continues to be available to growers. This one example, using conventional growing techniques, offers echoes of future issues if we hand seed sovereignty, our ability to grow plants and save their seeds, over to laboratories and big seed companies. And it doesn't take much imagination to think what the current incumbent in the White House might do if he thought he could use the seeds essential for food supply to control other nations. Sylvester said, "There is this obsession with human control. Gene editing is like putting a plaster on a gaping wound we've created. We're trying to use technology to solve the problems, but we don't know the unintended consequences. Given a chance, plants know what they're doing. The plants we are using are varied enough to deal with great swings of climate impacts. We're developing a seed resource which can get us through this period of climate chaos. These farmers know their land. They know their soil. They care about the consequences of their actions." We face many challenges in the coming decades, and it's understandable that there's an urge in some quarters to find clever answers. The allure of shiny new technologies is attractive to some, but at what cost to Scotland's brand? We're never going to be a nation which, like Ukraine before Russia's invasion, fed large sections of the world with their grain. Scotland's unique selling point is that we are a small nation producing high-quality food in beautiful natural settings. In my view, we should be supporting our nation's farmers to make the transition to regenerative farming techniques, which support biodiversity and mitigate the impact of climate change. We should invest in seed-saving skills and develop infrastructure, from community garden to commercial grower, so we can make the most of diverse resilience within the seeds we grow across our nation. And that article was written by Ruth Watson and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from the National on Tuesday the 22nd of April 2025 from the Culture section. Historic Scottish pier to reopen after storm with torchlit procession. This article is by Laura Pollock. The medieval pier at a Scottish harbour, which was closed to the public after Storm Agnes, will reopen with a torchlit procession next week. During the storms of November 2023, the 14th century structure at St Andrews Harbour suffered substantial damage to the tune of £3 million, sparking a major fundraising drive and months of repairs to the harbour area, which remain ongoing. With the seawall breach now restored and the walkways relaid, the main pier will reopen to the public from the morning of Thursday, May 1st, following the annual Gaudi procession the evening before. The torchlit procession and pier walk, organised by the Kate Kennedy Club, commemorates John Honey, a student who rescued members of the crew of the vessel Janet of Macduff in 1800. Every year, students, led by a piper, process by candlelight to the East Sands, where they lay a wreath at the site of the shipwreck. After processing from Younger Hall, North Street, St Andrews, the public are welcome to view the spectacle on the pier from around 7:30 p.m. The bulk of the repairs to date have been funded by a £360,000 grant from the Scottish Government Marine Directorate, allowing the seawall breach to be restored and the walkways to be relaid. Works were carried out by Lochgelly-based Realm Construction, part of the Purvis Group. Donations have also been provided by several trusts and foundations, with nearly £20,000 donated by the University of St Andrews student community, students and alumni. Major engineering repairs to restore the pier's connection to the cliffs remain unfunded, requiring approximately £2 million. With major grant applications underway, it is thought that a funding gap of around £500,000 will remain. Ken Sweeney, chairman of St Andrews Harbour Trust, said, "After more than 16 months of closure, the reopening of the pier marks a significant milestone for both St Andrews Harbour Trust and the wider community. The progress made since the storm damage occurred has been nothing short of remarkable. Special recognition goes to Realm Construction, whose tradesmen have worked tirelessly in all weathers and challenging conditions to bring the pier back to life. Reopening the pier in time for the Gaudi procession feels especially meaningful. This beloved iconic tradition where students and townspeople gather as night falls has long symbolised the close bond between town and gown. To have the pier ready for this celebration adds a powerful layer of significance to the occasion. However, our work is far from finished. Essential repairs to the structure, especially to the less visible but equally critical areas, are still needed. So we are appealing to the public, individuals and businesses alike, to help bridge the remaining £500,000 funding gap. Their generosity to date has been extraordinary, and with continued support, we can finish what we've started and preserve this cherished landmark for years to come." And that article was written by Laura Pollock and read by Lynn McNeil.
The National Politics on Wednesday the 23rd of April. English voters don't prioritise keeping the union together, a report finds. A front-page article written by James Walker. The attitude of English voters towards the union has been revealed in a new report published on St George's Day. The research by Professor Ailsa Henderson of the University of Edinburgh and Professor Richard Wynne-Jones is titled The Shameful Conquest of England, and found that less than half of respondents said it was a priority that the UK stays together. It also found that there is a sense of grievance about the perceived cost and political influence of other nations. This includes 33% of those asked believing Scotland receives more than its fair share as part of the Union, compared with just 9% thinking the opposite. Those who identified as being more English than British also had an ambivalence towards the Union, according to the report. The report read, "There is a striking degree of ambivalence about the continuing territorial integrity of the UK state amongst English identifiers, including a tendency to regard the goal of Brexit as being far more important than maintaining the place of either Scotland or Northern Ireland in the United Kingdom." Meanwhile, the research also found that a majority of voters in England described themselves as angry or fearful of politics. It found that 60% of voters in England say current politics makes them feel angry, 55% say it makes them fearful, and a huge 78% say it makes them feel frustrated. By contrast, only 9% reported feeling hopeful, and a tiny 3% said it made them happy. Reform voters are the angriest, according to research, at 82%, followed by Greens voters at 72%. Although there is a sense of frustration across the board, with even Labour's own supporters reporting high degrees of frustration, 80%, ahead of the Conservatives at 77%, and tied with the Liberal Democrats, 80%, but still behind the Greens, 85%, and Reform voters at 93%. Responding to the findings, co-author Professor Henderson said, almost 10 years after the Brexit referendum and after electing a new government last year, English politics is marked by continued grievance, frustration and anger, rather than hope. She added, addressing the UK's relationship with Europe remains a top priority, but it is former Remain voters or rejoiners who now list it as a top concern. Grievance with the Union and how England is governed continues to suggest that the English feel that their voice is not heard and that their culture and identity are not given the attention that they deserve. Professor Jones, meanwhile, said that Englishness remains a powerful force in UK politics and one that has been most successfully translated into political capital by Reform UK. Meanwhile, there is little in our findings to suggest enthusiasm for the UK Union among the English, and neither Leavers nor Remainers are happy with the Brexit settlement, although it seems that most Leavers would prefer not to have to think about it, he said. A front-page article written by James Walker. The National News on Wednesday the 23rd of April. Glasgow seeks asylum seekers pause as costs balloon. An article written by Hamish Morrison. The UK government must stop sending asylum seekers to Scotland's largest city, the local council has said. Glasgow City Council said that the Home Office must pause dispersals to the city, which takes in by far the greatest numbers of asylum seekers anywhere in Scotland. It's one of the most significant asylum dispersal centres in the UK as a whole, and leaders have warned that the cash-strapped council cannot cope with the financial pressure. An investigation by the Herald newspaper has revealed that the costs of supporting asylum seekers in Glasgow are ballooning from an estimated £26.5 million in 2024-2025 to a projected £79 million in 2027-2028. Despite UK government plans to have asylum seekers spread more evenly across the country, it's also emerged that of 360 British regions, 1 in 6 were not housing any asylum seekers as of the end of last year. With 67 asylum seekers per 10,000 people in the city, Glasgow is the UK's biggest city for asylum seekers outside of London per head. A spokesperson for Glasgow City Council said, "We've been trying to ask the Home Office for a pause in dispersal so that we can work through the backlog of cases. We've written on several occasions saying this, and we haven't had a response to our most recent letter asking for a meeting." The Council has made attempts to address the issue, with Glasgow's homelessness convener Alan Casey requesting a meeting with Home Office Minister Angela Eagle. Her trip was cancelled at the last minute and has not been rescheduled. Meeting papers for the Glasgow City Integration Joint Board state that homelessness services are coming under pressure owing to a significant increase in positive leave to remain decisions for asylum seekers. Increased demand as a result of the streamlined asylum process means that it's likely that the Council will be unable to offer temporary accommodation on first request for all households, according to the papers. A UK government spokesperson told the Herald, despite inheriting huge pressures on the asylum system, we're working to make sure individuals have the support that they need following an asylum decision to help local authorities better plan their assistance with homelessness. We're working right across the UK to give councils as much notice as possible of newly recognised refugees. We've doubled the move-on period to 56 days and have mobilised liaison officers to support asylum seekers in the Glasgow City Council area. An article written by Hamish Morrison. The National News on Wednesday the 23rd of April. Hundreds of bus drivers to go on strike in the west of Scotland. An article written by Lucy Jackson. Bus services in the west of Scotland are set to be disrupted after hundreds of bus drivers voted to go on strike. On Wednesday, Unite the union confirmed that 500 stagecoach drivers will go on strike over a series of days next month, after voting 98% in favour of industrial action. It comes after members rejected an unacceptable 4% pay offer by Stagecoach West Scotland, which Unite said would leave workers as one of the poorest paid across Stagecoach's UK operations. Unite said despite ongoing talks with the company, a significantly improved offer has not been put to the drivers who operate out of several depots in Ayr, Arran, Ardrossan, Dumfries, Kilmarnock and Stranraer. The union will bring bus services to a stop, with strike action on May the 2nd, the 6th, the 9th, the 12th, the 16th, the 19th and the 23rd. Unite General Secretary Sharon Graham said, Unite's members in Stagecoach West Scotland are being forced to take strike action because of an unacceptable pay offer. It's a profitable company and it can easily afford to put a fairer offer on the table for its hard-working drivers. We will fully back our members in their fight for better jobs, pay and conditions. Unite's industrial officer, Siobhan Macready, said, Our drivers are on one of the lowest rates of pay across the whole of the Stagecoach group. It's unacceptable that the company has refused to tackle low pay. Unite's members have no option but to take strike action to get a fair pay rise. They are simply seeking pay parity. Strike action during May is set to bring bus services to a stop, but the blame for any disruption lies squarely with Stagecoach. Stagecoach UK was contacted for comment. An article written by Lucy Jackson. The National Politics on Wednesday the 23rd of April. Labour government borrows almost £15 billion more than expected. An article written by Lucy Jackson. The Labour government borrowed almost £15 billion more than forecast in the last financial year, according to official figures. The Office for National Statistics reported that borrowing, the difference between total public sector spending and income over the 12 months to the end of March, came in at £151.9 billion. That provisional sum was £20.7 billion more than in the same 12-month period a year earlier, and £14.6 billion more than the £137.3 billion forecast by the Office for Budget Responsibility at the recent spring statement. The Office for National Statistics added that the figure represented 5.3% of the UK's gross domestic product, 0.5 percentage points more than in 2023-2024. It was partly driven by £16.4 billion of borrowing in March, the third highest March borrowing since monthly records began in 1993, behind only the 2021 financial year during the peak of the COVID pandemic and the 2010 financial year following the global crisis. The latest figures put increasing pressure on public finances as the US President Donald Trump's tariffs pose a threat to economic growth. The figures reflect the period shortly before President Trump unveiled a range of tariffs on UK imports, which heightened global trade tensions and are expected to limit economic growth around the world. On Tuesday, the International Monetary Fund lowered its growth outlook for the UK by 0.5 percentage points this year and cut the United States growth projections by 0.9 percentage points. The UK's downgrade partly reflected tariffs, but also weaker consumption amid higher inflation, which has been driven by bills and energy price hikes. Matt Swanell, Chief Economic Advisor to the EY Item Club, said, Having ended the year on a poor footing, recent US tariffs are only going to make the UK fiscal arithmetic more challenging. He said that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves' recent spring statement only left a slim margin for error against the fiscal rules, which limit the government's ability to borrow to fund day-to-day spending. Most of this will likely be used up as the combination of reduced access to a major export market, a weaker global economy and lingering uncertainty is set to hold back growth, Mr Swanell said. Elliot Jordan-Doak, senior economist for Pantheon Macroeconomics, agreed that fracturing global trade and geopolitical uncertainties are going to make the Chancellor's life even more difficult. President Trump's sweeping tariffs on US imports are expected to impact UK economic growth, which will further weigh on the public finances, he warned. He added, the public finances are already in a difficult position heading into the trade war, and we think both taxes and borrowing will need to be raised in the October budget. Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Darren Jones, stressed that the government will never play fast and loose with the public finances. We are laser focused on making sure that taxpayer money is delivering our plan for change missions to put more money into people's pockets, rebuild the NHS and strengthen our borders, he said. An article written by Lucy Jackson. The National News on Wednesday the 23rd of April. NASA astronaut lands at a Scottish airport after a mission. An article written by Amy Miles. NASA's longest-serving and oldest active astronaut, Don Pettit, made an unexpected stop in Glasgow following his return to Earth from a recent space mission. The 70-year-old astronaut and his international crew landed safely over the weekend in a parachute-assisted capsule, touching down on the steppes of Kazakhstan. After medical checks at the landing site, Dr. Pettit boarded a flight bound for Houston in Texas, while his Russian crewmates returned to their training base in Star City, near Moscow. Surprisingly, flight tracking data revealed that Dr. Pettit's plane made a stop at Glasgow Prestwick Airport on Sunday after an 8-hour journey from Kazakhstan. With more than 18 months spent in orbit over his 29-year career, Dr. Pettit has completed multiple missions and logged 13 hours of spacewalks. Upon landing, he was photographed giving a thumbs up as rescue crews helped him from the capsule into an inflatable medical tent. NASA said Dr. Pettit is doing well and within the expected range of health following his return to Earth. An article written by Amy Miles. The National on Wednesday the 23rd of April. Opinion. Northern Ireland shows the only way out of the UK Union. A column written by Seamus Logan. I've called Aberdeenshire home now for many years, but there's still no mistaking my Antrim accent. There's also no mistaking my affiliation to the SNP and to Scottish independence, unless you're the hapless Westminster Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, who somehow managed to get confused between myself and the DUP's Jim Shannon a few weeks ago. While it's customary for everyone to avoid mixing politics between Scotland and Northern Ireland, Brexit and the ongoing constitutional question have brought the question of consent to the fore in both places. Specifically on how, if a majority of people in both Scotland and Northern Ireland wish to leave the UK, those wishes will be given democratic effect. I've written before about how the 1998 Good Friday Agreement establishes some fundamental principles on Northern Ireland's constitutional future. Firstly, in terms of how it recognises in law and international treaty that it's for the people of Ireland alone to exercise their right of self-determination on the basis of consent. And secondly, on how the agreement commits the UK government to organise a referendum if at any time it appears likely that a majority of those voting in Northern Ireland would express a wish that it should cease to be part of the United Kingdom. Most Scots regard our place in the Union as being similarly based on consent. But while we have the precedence of 2 devolution votes and 1 independence referendum to go on, as well as our deeply cherished outlook that the people are sovereign, as they stand, it's only Northern Ireland which has this right and pathway explicitly set out in law. No doubt there are some out there who would describe calling for a similar set of ground rules for Scotland to be in some way bending the knee, representing a sellout of their rather singular view of what Scottish sovereignty can mean in practice. However, the fact remains that the only way out of the Union is through consent, and Northern Ireland is the only part of the UK where that process is currently codified. Obviously, there are a few gaps in that commitment, such as the lack of detail about how and when a UK government might assess that a likely majority for a united Ireland has emerged. Naturally, all attempts to get an answer to that from ministers up until now have led to much the same kind of evasive, diversionary waffle as you get when asking the same sort of question about Scotland. You might, if you were being kind, refer to the UK government's reluctance to answer these questions clearly as being an act of deliberate strategic ambiguity. In Northern Ireland's case, though, there's not much left for any UK government to be strategically ambiguous about, since the agreement also makes clear that a simple majority of those voting would be sufficient to decide the outcome. So, after a week when one Scottish opinion pollster put independent support at 56%, let's all raise a glass to the unlikely figure of Northern Ireland Minister Fleur Anderson. In an illuminating interview for Agenda NI magazine, the Minister has done us all a huge service by confirming that so far as the UK government is concerned, the criteria for holding any future Irish border poll would be based on opinion polls. Presumably, it won't be judged on the basis of just one opinion poll or even the consistent polling from just one pollster. However, if a range of reputable pollsters are regularly returning data showing a clear majority for leaving the UK over an extended period, we now have it clarified that this is what the UK government will regard as being a tipping point for holding any such poll. The late Labour leader John Smith used to describe Scottish devolution as being unfinished business, calling it the settled will of the Scottish people. But while that was true back then, it's been clear for so long as there's been a Scottish Parliament that the new settled will of Scots is that the status of that Scottish Parliament itself remains unfinished business. So how do we finish that business? Sadly, there's no magic button out there which can be pushed to dissolve the Union or get Indy done. As I've said before in these pages, challenging the Westminster parties to concede the principle of consent in letting Scotland determine its own democratic future points the way. But for that to have any meaning, we also need to build support for independence so that we have sufficient numbers of Scottish voters consistently backing it. Polling suggests that independence supporting parties will have a big majority at next year's Holyrood elections. While the only circumstance which has exerted enough pressure to date has been the 2011 single-party majority for the SNP, only achieved through a solid SNP 1 and 2 showing, those pro-Indy politicians who are elected will need to be mandated on the basis of upholding Scotland's right to choose, and on their willingness to work to increase and solidify current popular support for independence. In that, we might find ourselves being helped greatly by the choices that are being made by an alarming number of voters in England. The Faragists might be a joke of a party led by a joke of a politician, but as they rise in the polls, it's a joke that no one is laughing at anymore. We can challenge the rise of the far right within Scotland through political leadership. But if we want to be as free as we ever can be of the bad choices being made south of the border, we need to be persuading more Scots to start actively choosing the independence path for themselves. A column written by Seamus Logan, who is the SNP MP for Aberdeenshire North and Moray East. The National News on Wednesday the 23rd of April. Plans unveiled for a retail and restaurant development in a Scottish coastal town. An article written by Alistair Ferguson. Plans to create a new retail and business development on the outskirts of St Andrews have been submitted. The planning application lodged to Fife Council by developers West Coast Estates includes restaurants, offices and business units in the west of the world-renowned coastal town. Developers behind the proposal, which is planned for Craigtown, say it could create around 170 new jobs and help boost the local economy. If planning for the project is approved, developers said another 100 jobs would be created during construction. The application forms the first stage of a wider development for Craigtown, which also includes more than 1,000 homes. West Coast Estate said the project would help enhance the area with much-needed amenities. West Coast Estates Director Ifaka Mian said, "We are pleased to submit this planning application to Fife Council for a new mixed-use development for Craigtown, St Andrews. The £16 million investment will deliver significant economic benefits, creating local jobs and contributing £500,000 annually into business rates to support essential services. He added, the site is ideally located to provide much-needed amenities and services for the community and will play a key role in the wider Craigtown Master Plan. This is an exciting opportunity for businesses to establish themselves or to expand in a dynamic and growing part of St Andrews. An article written by Alistair Ferguson. The National News on Wednesday the 23rd of April. Scots overwhelmingly back a ban on greyhound racing, new poll finds. An article written by Xander Elliots. Scots support a complete ban on greyhound racing by 2-1, a new poll has found, as a bill aiming to outlaw the sport is lodged at Holyrood. Polling commissioned by the American lobby group Grey 2K USA Worldwide found that 68% of Scots support banning the dog racing, while 32% back it remaining legal. The results come as a new bill is published at the Scottish Parliament proposing an end to greyhound racing in Scotland. The member's bill has been proposed by Green MSP Mark Ruskell, who has spoken about his own experience rescuing a greyhound. Christine Dorchak, the president and co-founder of Grey 2K USA Worldwide, said, Greyhound racing is a disreputable pastime that exploits gentle dogs, exposing them to pain, injury and death, so it comes as no surprise that the majority of Scots want to see an end to this inherently cruel, gambling-led industry. With legislation now being considered by the Scottish Parliament, greyhounds may get their second chance in Scotland. Parliamentarians have before them the historic opportunity to make Scotland the first nation in the UK to say no more to the confinement, injury and death, drugging and overbreeding endemic to the greyhound gambling industry. The poll that Grey 2K USA Worldwide commissioned was designed and conducted by the Edinburgh-based Diffley Partnership from April the 11th to April the 16th. The headline figures of 68% versus 32% come from a representative sample of 1,037 people, with people who answered don't know excluded. The Scottish Greens said that according to the RSPCA, there are only 9 countries in the world that still allow commercial greyhound racing, including all 4 UK nations. The party further pointed to data from 2023, which showed that 109 greyhounds died trackside in the UK, with a further 4,238 greyhounds injured during racing. Mr Ruskell said, "This is a milestone moment for my bill, and I'm grateful to all of the MSPs and campaigners who have helped us to get to this stage. Greyhound racing is a cruel sport that causes a huge amount of harm to dogs. Far too many have been killed or badly injured on the tracks. There is no safe or humane way to force a group of dogs to run around an oval track at 40 miles an hour, and it's totally wrong to make them do it in the name of profit. With Wales taking action, Scotland is looking increasingly isolated in allowing this gambling-led spectacle to continue. I hope that the Scottish Government and MSPs from all parties will support me and that we can get this bill over the line to end greyhound racing for good." In February, the Welsh Government announced that it would ban the cruel gambling-led entertainment as soon as practically possible. Last year, Holyrood's Rural Affairs Committee called for higher welfare standards for greyhounds bred for racing in Scotland, rather than a complete ban. Grey 2K USA Worldwide said that Scotland has just one remaining unregulated track, Thornton in Fife. It pointed to research by Bigger Economics, claiming that the track contributes next to nothing to the economy and could be far more beneficial to the local community if the site was repurposed for housing. An article written by Xander Elliots. The National Politics on Wednesday the 23rd of April. The Scottish Government delivers a statement after the Supreme Court sex ruling. An article written by Xander Elliots. The SNP government has delivered its response to the Supreme Court's ruling that sex is biological in UK law. The Scottish Government said that it will amend its guidance on the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Act, which sparked last week's judgment. Social Justice Secretary Shirley-Anne Somerville also said that there are no plans to bring back the controversial Scottish gender reforms, which are being blocked by the UK Government. Last Wednesday, the UK's highest court rejected the Scottish Government's arguments that the category of woman included trans women who held a gender recognition certificate. Previously, trans women in Scotland had counted towards female gender representation on public boards. The 2004 Gender Recognition Act, which introduced gender recognition certificates, used the terms sex and gender interchangeably and said a gender recognition certificate meant that someone becomes for all purposes the acquired gender. However, the Supreme Court ruling means that trans people with or without a certificate will not be able to access single-sex spaces provided under the 2010 Equality Act and will not count as women under the 2018 Gender Representation Act. Speaking in Parliament yesterday, the Social Justice Secretary addressed the ruling, saying that the Scottish Government accepted it and was looking at updating its guidance on single-sex spaces. The Scottish Government does, of course, accept the judgment of the Supreme Court, Ms Somerville said. It's a significant legal ruling and it's right that we take time to consider it. Ms Somerville added that it was important to recognise the tone and the temperature of the surrounding debate. It should be clear to all of us in this chamber, regardless of our view on any of these matters, including the judgment last Wednesday, that it has a very significant impact on people, she added. Ms Somerville said that the ruling had sparked real anxiety from trans and non-binary people. She said it's significant that the Supreme Court stated in their judgment that the rights of the trans community are enshrined in law, and I want to reassure our trans community that you are valued and that the Scottish Government is fully committed to protecting everyone's rights, and that includes your community. The SNP minister further said that the judgment had confirmed the definition of women under the Equality Act and called for the Equality and Human Rights Commission to issue updated guidance on the impact of the court ruling. She added, "We're amending guidance on the public boards legislation to take account of the ruling." Earlier on Tuesday, Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer said that a woman is an adult female when pushed on whether he believed a trans woman was a woman, following the Supreme Court's ruling. An article written by Xander Elliots. The National News on Wednesday the 23rd of April. Call for more Scottish produce in supermarkets. An article written by Lucy Jackson. Supermarkets have been urged to increase the amount of Scottish produce on shelves in Scotland, as new research found that just 17% of own brand items were sourced in the country. It came as new research from the National Farmers Union Scotland, or NFU, found that farmers and crofters could be presented with a £500 million opportunity if the major retailers stocked more Scottish produce. The union's Shelf Watch initiative looked at the availability of Scottish produce on sale at Aldi, Asda, the Co-op, Lidl, M&S Food, Morrisons, Sainsbury's and Tesco. NFU Scotland conducted research over 4 phases throughout 2024 and early 2025. The results, released yesterday, revealed stark variations in Scottish sourcing, with just 17% of all own-label products from Scotland. Aldi was the front-runner, leading the rankings in every phase of research, with an overall average of 40%. Second was Lidl, with a 30% average, and the Co-op in third place with 22%. Meanwhile, M&S Food had the biggest, albeit modest, improvement in its support for Scottish produce. More generally, support for British produce was strong, with an average of 63% of own-label products being sourced within the UK. In response to this analysis, NFU Scotland has identified a potential £500 million opportunity for Scottish farmers, crofters and growers if levels of Scottish sourcing was increased by just 12% in the coming years. To achieve this, NFU Scotland has written to all 8 retailers, setting out this challenge to adopt a Scottish First policy, prioritising Scottish produce across all commodities and reducing reliance on imports. NFU Scotland President Andrew Connan said, "Shelf Watch has delivered vital insight. Our clear message to retailers is that by working together, we have a golden opportunity to support Scotland's farmers and crofters, as well as giving their customers more of what they want. We know that the value of grocery sales across Scotland is significant, and we believe that Scottish farmers and crofters could get a greater share of this value if retailers work with us and the wider industry to take forward the actions we set out today." Overall, these results show a disappointing level of Scottish sourcing, with around 17% of own-label products labelled as Scottish, and no real improvement throughout the year. That said, the picture is very mixed across each of the retailers. I'd like to congratulate Aldi in particular, and also Lidl for its ongoing commitment. Through this work, we've identified the key areas for action and commitment. Retailers and NFU Scotland, along with other industry partners, stand ready to work in partnership to support this. If we get it right, the results could be transformational for our farmers, crofters and growers. Of course, none of this will happen in isolation, and we need to see effective government policy that supports a vibrant farming industry. An article written by Lucy Jackson. The National News on Wednesday the 23rd of April. Tory MP calls for the Army to build a replacement bridge. An article written by Mark McLean. MP John Cooper has again called for the Army to put up a temporary bridge in Kirkcudbright after the Scotland office claimed that it was powerless to act. Mr Cooper has written to First Minister John Swinney after a failed initial contact with the UK Government's Scotland office. The Kirkcudbright Bridge, which crosses over the River Dee, had to be shut to vehicles until further notice in March, forcing drivers to make a 6-mile detour. The Dumfries and Galloway Conservative MP said, "While locals and businesses in Kirkcudbright struggle with the massive inconvenience of the closure of the bridge over the Dee to vehicle traffic, it means big detours. I wondered if the Royal Engineers might offer a short-term solution. Any use of the Army for civilian matters has to be approved by the Scotland office, but incredibly they say they can't instigate anything and have to wait for a request from the Scottish Government. Talk about the tail wagging the dog." He added, "It's jaw-dropping that a UK Government Cabinet Minister, such as the Secretary of State for Scotland, has to wait for the First Minister to act. So much for the supposed reset in relations between Westminster and Holyrood. It's supposed to be two governments working together these days, but instead it's two governments ignoring the southwest of Scotland, both hiding behind the Scotland Act and devolution instead of delivering action." Mr Cooper said that he's written to Mr Swinney asking him to contact the Scotland office about the use of the Royal Engineers, the Army's bridging experts, at Kirkcudbright. However, he insisted that he was not hopeful of any movement. The bridge was suddenly closed on the 21st of March due to structural and safety issues. Business Gateway representatives have been in touch with affected businesses to offer support. The first of regular progress meetings on the Kirkcudbright Bridge between council officers and elected members for the area will take place within the next couple of weeks, once council officers have been advised of definitive first steps after all initial engineering work has been done. An article written by Mark McLean. The National News on Wednesday the 23rd of April. 2/5 of households cut essentials to pay bills. An article written by Jane MacLeod. More than 2/5 of households are having to cut spending on food and other essentials as a result of rising energy bills, research has found. 1/3 of households across Scotland are finding it difficult to afford their energy bills, the Scottish Climate Survey for 2024 revealed. More than half of those who rent their home are struggling with the cost, the research found, along with just under half of those in households whose income is less than £26,000 a year, and 46% of disabled people. The research published by the Scottish Government added that 42% of households were having to cut back spending on food and other essentials as a result of the need to spend more on energy bills. It noted that more than 4/5 of households have installed insulation in their properties, with loft insulation the most common. But the Scottish Climate Survey added that the use of clean and renewable heating systems was uncommon. According to the report, less than 5% of households have a heat pump installed, with cost and a lack of interest said to be the main barriers given for not having such a system. The same survey also found that while an overwhelming majority of households thought that they were likely to be hit by storms, strong winds and heavy rain in the next 5 years, a smaller proportion had felt that they were prepared for this. So while 94% of households believe that they are likely to experience storms and strong winds, only 59% of households feel that they're prepared for this. Similarly, 92% of households thought that they were likely to experience extremely heavy rain, but less than 2/3 feel prepared for such weather. The report noted that there was a gap between how likely households thought that they were to experience storms and strong winds, extremely heavy rain, very low temperatures, snow and ice, and flooding, and how prepared they felt for these events. And while almost 3/4 feel that climate change is an immediate and urgent problem, the research also revealed that 13% believe that it's more a problem for the future. In addition, less than half think that the transition to net zero will improve the quality of life by 2045, while 11% think that it will make things worse. Acting Climate Action Minister Alistair Allen said, "Whilst the powers over energy price setting and regulation are reserved, we continue to prioritise support for the most vulnerable households through access to long-term, sustainable measures with our energy efficiency programmes. We're also calling on the UK Government to introduce targeted energy bill discounts to support those who need it most." An article written by Jane MacLeod.
This is from The National on Thursday 24th April 2025, from the Culture section. First Scottish Gaelic translation of The Hobbit published by Laura Pollock. The first Scottish Gaelic translation of J.R.R. Tolkien's classic The Hobbit has been completed by a University of Aberdeen professor. Murray Watson, Professor of Gaelic and Translation and a lifelong Tolkien fan, began working on a Gaelic version titled A Hobbit prior to the COVID lockdowns. Delays from this and fitting the project around his teaching commitments meant that arriving at a final version took much longer than expected. Now, after many phases of editing, the book is available to order, complete with an afterword explaining why Watson alighted on the word Hobbit to translate Hobbit, and why it is a and not the more expected an. The Gaelic translation, supported by the Gaelic Books Council, joins a growing list of languages, allowing new engagement with the classic story the world over, including Hawaiian, Esperanto, Breton and Yiddish. Professor Watson is director of Ionide Eachan McLachlan, the National Centre for Gaelic Translation, which exists specifically to support the translation of literature into Gaelic as well as Manx and Irish. In addition to the Hobbit translation, the Centre is supporting a book co-edited by Watson, which features a set of essays from translators and scholars on various aspects of the translation process. Enjoyment of reading is of tremendous importance on many levels when it comes to the esteem and status of a language, he said. Being able to select from a wide range of engaging texts is also extremely important when learning a language or when making the decision to dig in and make that long, sustained extra effort necessary to go from competence in a language to mastery. I've read the book in at least 9 languages so far. Whenever I learn a new language now, I always check to see if there's a translation of The Hobbit. If there is, I buy it. That way, I can read the novel early on in the learning process, because I already know the story very well at this point. Every single time I read it, in every single language, I get to experience the deep, rich joy of discovering Tolkien's world. The book includes all the drawings by the author, and Professor Watson says it was a pleasure and privilege to delve deeply into the maps, runes, and illustrations when triple-checking translations before publication. It's no wonder people fell in love with this book and continue to do so nearly 90 years after it was first published, he added. I'm very lucky to have had the chance to work with it, and I hope that people enjoy it. Watson is also completing a Gaelic translation of H.G. Wells's The Time Machine, which includes an academic essay on how elements of translation theory can help the translation work through some of the trickier parts of the text. The first appearance of Sherlock Holmes in Arthur Conan Doyle's A Study in Scarlet is next on the list to be translated to Gaelic, and Professor Watson is hunting for interesting novels in French, German or Spanish that have never been translated into English to further expand Gaelic reading lists. Watson teaches on the MSc in Translation, which is available online and on campus, and makes the University of Aberdeen the only institution in the world that offers a Gaelic translation degree at this level. That article was by Laura Pollock. This is from The National on Thursday, 24th April 2025, from the Sport section. Former world champion Alec Arthur guiding son Alec Jr. into pro ranks, by Graham McPherson. Alec Arthur has worn many different hats throughout an illustrious career, but will experience a new role next month as the dad of a professional debutante. Arthur is, of course, one of Scotland's greatest ever boxers, a former World and Commonwealth Games champion who's gone on to share his expertise both as a coach and a popular television commentator. The microphone, however, will be laid temporarily to one side on May 24th, when his eldest son, Alec Jr., takes to the ring at the Hydro in Glasgow on the undercard of a star-studded night of boxing headlined by Josh Taylor. Unlike his younger brother Macklin, Alec Jr. has arrived relatively late to boxing. But this will be no quiet introduction to the world of the pros, not when you're making your debut at the biggest indoor venue in Scotland, and your dad is still one of the most recognisable faces in the sport. Arthur Sr. will be in his corner as always, and there is a quiet pride at watching his son prepare to follow in his footsteps, eager to make a similar mark on the professional game. I'm still involved in boxing to this degree because of my other son, Macklin, really, he reveals. Or I wouldn't be involved in the physical side of the sport, but Macklin pestered me so much to train with him as he started boxing long before Alec did. But we're now here. Alec really wanted to turn professional. It was his own decision as a young man to make for himself. And of course, I'm going to support my son. He's a brilliant young boxer, and I'm sure he's got a great future ahead of him. I made my debut at the Wythenshawe Forum in Manchester back in 2000, and it was nothing like the magnitude of this one. I wasn't sitting on a stage talking to the media and stuff like that in the build-up. They're spoiled these days. But it should be a massive night. Arthur has done more than his bit to pass on the torch, both to his own sons but also to the future Scottish boxing prospects in general. Also fighting on next month's card is Drew Limond, the son of Willie, who Arthur famously fought for the British title back in 2003. Taylor, at 34 years old, helps link that past to the present day, and Arthur underlined how important it is those at the top to leave a legacy. If it weren't for the likes of myself, Scott Harrison, Ricky Burns, and now Josh, these kinds of events wouldn't be happening, he adds. Now the torch has been passed down again. There's a great depth of talent in Scotland right now. There are some fantastic young fighters in the country coming through, some great talent. So this platform is perfect for that. Speaking simply as a fan of Scottish boxing, Arthur can't hide his excitement at the match between Nathaniel Collins and Lee McGregor for the WBC silver featherweight belt, with the winner moving closer to a crack at the full world title. I keep telling everybody that Collins versus McGregor is an unbelievable fight for Scotland, he gushes. It really is. It's the same magnitude of myself versus Willie Limond or Ricky Burns or Craig Doherty. That's a good fight. Lee and Nathaniel are both world-class operators, so the Scottish fans are in for a treat with that fight. Obviously, the main event, everyone's there to see the former undisputed world light welterweight champion, Taylor, at his new weight class. But McGregor and Collins will be special. It's a real shame we were denied a McGregor versus Cash Farouk rematch, but this will be on a par with what they would have been. Maybe even bigger with what's at stake for both fighters. These guys are now maybe one fight away from a world title shot, which is amazing. And for them to meet at this juncture of their career, this kind of fight could warrant a rematch. It could be close enough that there's a rematch after it. With Josh coming to the end of his career, it's about passing it on. We want to see more world champions. We want to see bigger fights here, and hopefully this will be the start of that. Arthur and Taylor have been close for some time now, and the veteran is intrigued to see how the self-styled Tartan Tornado fares in his first step up to welterweight, where he takes on the wily Echo Essuman. Will Taylor be a man with a point to prove after a disappointing few years? I think he will be, agrees Arthur. He's still got a big following. He's still generally recognised as Scotland's best fighter. He'll want to come out there on the night and show he's still got all the attributes that he once had. The new weight class will probably suit him a little bit more. He's obviously up against a tough opponent. Essuman's not there to mess around, so it's going to be another great fight. That article was by Graham Macpherson. This is from The National on Thursday 24th April 2025. From the Sport section. Scotland striker equals Denis Law's Torino goal record after 63 years. By Matthew Lindsay. Scotland striker Shay Adams has equalled the haul of goals recorded by his legendary countryman Denis Law at Torino during the 1961-62 season. Adams opened the scoring for the Turin club in the first half of their 2-0 win over their Serie A rivals Udinese in the Olimpico Grand Torino last night. The 28-year-old who moved to Italy last summer after leaving Southampton has now been on target 10 times in the 2024-25 campaign. That was the number of goals which Manchester United and Scotland great and former European Footballer of the Year, Law, netted during the season he spent at Torino. Adams has been on the brink of the achievement since finding the target in a 2-2 draw with Parma away at the Ennio Tardini Stadium at the start of last month. He confessed he was pleased to finally get into double figures and move alongside the Aberdeen-born legend in the scoring charts. "It's a wonderful feeling to have achieved it," he said. "He was a great player who I knew well. But the important thing remains the 3 points. Tonight we did our job with a victory and 3 points brought home. We must focus day by day, even if obviously as a team we must have the ambition to grow further." Adams now has the chance to surpass Law's accomplishment in the Serie A match against title chaser Napoli at the Diego Armando Maradona Stadium on Sunday. He will come up against his Scotland teammates Billy Gilmore and Scott McTominay in that fixture. McTominay, who moved to Napoli in a £25 million transfer from Manchester United last summer, took his tally for the Serie A High Flyers to 10, with a second-half winner against Monza away on Saturday. Lewis Ferguson overtook Law as the highest-scoring Scot in Serie A history when he bagged a late winner for Bologna against Atalanta in December 2023. A representative of the Denis Law Legacy Trust travelled to Italy before Christmas last year to present the former Hamilton and Aberdeen midfielder with a trophy to honour his achievement. The lawman, who sadly passed away at the age of 84 back in January, also sent his compatriot a personal message congratulating him. Earlier this year, Ferguson said, "It was special because he was such an iconic player in Scotland, one of the absolute greatest. And it was such a surprise to receive such a lovely, detailed message from him telling me, 'Well done, keep going, keep it up.' It was really, really nice. It was a beautiful message, something he didn't need to do, and it meant the world to me. That's why I was so sad to see the news of his death. He was such an iconic man, an iconic player, one of the greatest we've ever seen. He was one of the trailblazers for Scots in Italy, and let's just say back in the day it probably wasn't as easy as it is nowadays. Everything is there for you now. It must have been much more difficult in the 1960s, I'd imagine. So yeah, thank you to Denis for doing that, because he was an inspiration to everybody that plays the game, and it was absolutely an inspiration to me when I received that. That article was by Matthew Lindsay.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.